I would like you to understand a few things about mental illness. First of all, let me just defer to my superiors on this subject before I get into it and acknowledge the fact that there are infinitely more people in the world who know infinitely more about this than I do. Mental illness and mental health. However, what I would like to share with you is just a general understanding of the roots of mental illness. First, I would like to share a story about an article that I read once in a magazine by an outfit in Dallas, Texas, who deals with mental health and mental wellness, and they said that the number of people in the world who deal with mental illness is 1 out of 1. That means everybody. And I agree with them. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But first, I would just like to say that the idea that there are normal people in the world versus abnormal people in the world is not real. The truth is that we are all abnormal to some degree. It's just the degree that changes with every person. So, my assertion that we all deal with mental illness is based upon the fact that all human beings have partaken of the knowledge of good and evil, as talked about in the Bible, and that makes us all mentally ill. So, I would like to draw an illustration. Well, I've already drawn an illustration. So this represents Christ. Christ is the perfectly mentally healthy one, the only perfectly healthy mentally one. Okay? The rest of us fall out here. Okay? In a general sense. All right? So, the degree to which people suffer from mental illness determines how we often see people. So, people who live right around here, very close to being like Christ, the ideal picture of humanity in all of its perfection, are the ones that we deem to be normal and mentally healthy. But the fact is that they are not completely there. Okay? And if you doubt this fact, all you have to do is interact with anybody, any human being in the world, even the greatest leaders, the biggest politicians, presidents, leaders, icons, celebrities, whoever they are. Simple interaction with them and observation will show that they are not perfect. All of us have some abnormalities, okay? Now, as we start to move farther away from the norm, the benchmark, if you will, which is Christ, the one perfect human being, we get more and more into the realms of existence that look more and more unhealthy mentally and emotionally and spiritually. Okay? And you start getting farther and farther away, and people start to say, ooh, that dude's got some mental problems, or that dude's got some emotional problems, or that dude's got some spiritual problems. Dude, girl, whatever. And the farther and farther we get away, out here, you get labeled mentally ill. Okay? So, Christ is the only perfect human being. Everybody else, to some degree, is mentally ill. Alright? Now, within this, there are an infinite number of complexities and variations of which I know very, very little. And I defer to my superiors and those who study this dynamic in life and who know infinitely more than I do. Okay? This is simply a generalized explanation of the roots of mental illness. All of the people in the world, even the greatest leaders, deal with the mental illness that comes as a result of partaking of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. If you don't believe this, all you have to do is interact with them. Interaction with every single person on this planet will show you that they're all broken to some degree. So, how do we get mentally healthy in a generalized sense? Again, I defer to my leaders. There's more to it than just this. But in a very generalized sense, we, all of us, get healthy by getting off of partaking of that tree of the knowledge of good and evil and getting onto partaking of the tree of life, which is Christ himself. So, if you have somebody in your life who's telling you that you are mentally ill and they are claiming to be the well one, the healthy one, I'm not denying the fact that you might have a specific mental illness, okay? As I said, I don't claim to understand all that stuff. I defer to my superiors in this area, psychologists, experts who actually deal with this stuff on a day-to-day basis, okay? However, you can take comfort in the fact of knowing that that division between normal and abnormal, mentally healthy and mentally ill, is overall, in a general sense, an illusion, and it's not true, because every human being, and I challenge you and anybody else to go and start observing people. Watch people. Watch people closely, look in their eyes, listen to them, talk with them, interact with them. And when you do, start noticing the little quirks, the little insecurities, the little whatever, abnormalities, okay, that Jesus has absolutely none of, but everybody else does. Everybody. I don't care if they're the world's greatest leaders. I don't care if they're the world's greatest Christians. I don't care if they're the world's greatest politicians. I don't care who they are. I don't care if they're guys living under a bridge. I don't care if it's your average Joe. I don't care if it's everybody. Everybody has partaken of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which makes all of us mentally ill. People that you need to beware of are the people who won't admit this and who say, well, they're normal and there's nothing wrong with them. Because that's not realistic. That's not living in reality. And if you allow them to influence you like that, they will lead you into non-reality as well. Not that these people are to be judged, because they're human beings and they need to be loved just like everybody else. Just like those of us who admit that we're messed up need to be loved. So the people who don't admit they're messed up need to be loved. We all need to be loved. But it's easy for human beings, in a general sense, to be deceived and to believe wrong things. I guarantee we're all doing it to some degree. So we need to understand why people would believe that, why they would believe that they are normal, and some of the people out there are not normal. Again, it goes back to that continuum. So there's no anger, there's no judgment against anybody for these things. But in a general sense, you really gotta beware of those people who think like that there's nothing wrong with them, because the only way that anybody in this world gets to that point is in Christ. The only way anybody, any human being, ever gets to the point where they can say there's nothing wrong with me, or there's less wrong with me, or I'm well, or I'm healthy, or I'm normal, is in Christ, is through Christ. And there are people who do it. So when I make a video about mental illness, you know, there are a lot of you out there might be thinking of people, well, they're not mentally ill. Well, yeah, that's because they are like Christ. They are more like Christ, who is the standard of what is normal. So, and again, you might say, well, they're not Christians. Well, no kidding, but you don't have to be a Christian to have Christ-like characteristics, because the most Christ-like characteristic of all is love. And there's plenty of people who live in love because they're human beings. Human beings can live in love even if they're not Christians. So living in love and truth and responsibility, these things are ubiquitous. They're universal, right? Even if you're not living in Christ, you can still do them. However, there is no perfection. There is no getting to that ultimate standard of normal and righteousness and getting off of the knowledge of good and evil and getting to pure life, pure, perfect life, except in Christ. And that's where we're all going. So, hang on for the ride. And if you're a person that's been labeled with mental illness, don't sweat it. It's okay. They called Jesus crazy, so you're in good company.